Hey guys, welcome back to another Vanguard video. Today we're here talking about Jheva, and we finally have Vairina support. So technically this does support Mahar as well if you play Cloud and Prayers, but mostly this is for Jheva and the XoverDress deck. So first off, we have Judgment Blades equip Ars Vairina, and so this card has a lot of text. There's a lot of things, so there's a lot to break down. So first off, XoverDress, one Trickstar and one or more Prayer Dragons with different card names. So you can overdress this card simply with just, the new Trickstar and Seundi. Then auto, when discarded from your hand during your turn, put this card into soul, search your deck for up to one talisman, discard it, and shuffle your deck. So this opens up a lot of things. Technically, this is generic, so the really funny thing you can do with this, and also the restand effect gain crit, which we'll talk about later, also works on Elf Knights, is you could technically meme this with Elf Knights as well and have a crit restand on rear, and then with the other ultimate skill, your Eesure will also have a crit, which is absolutely hilarious. The bigger thing though for this is that this mills any talisman, and that includes the brand new Trickstar. This of course also includes Trick Moon and Veil Lord if you were to play this in Bav, which is just bonkers. Like, this card does a lot. Of course, it's doing the most for Jheva. Discard any talisman is huge because you set up basically the Trickstar you would res from drop. Obviously, you get one from Radline. So you basically have, two Trickstars you can rotate through, Trickstar and Seundis, or you basically set up any of, StravaRina, whatever you need for your turn 3 play in order to just grab it back from drop using Arnias, Cindy, a bunch of other cards you can play in the deck. So unfortunately, there isn't a lot of really easy Soul Blast besides, I would say, Gauntmere and maybe Bar Vairina. But I mean, that's not really the biggest option here because you have a lot of easy ways to grab from drop. So the biggest thing this does is free soul for the deck, which the deck really did need, honestly. Because especially when you get to late game, your soul actually does run out pretty fast if you don't have, Cindy in rotation. And getting out Cindy is really hard because you have no way to basically draw it easily besides, Mirrors of Vairina. So honestly, that one auto alone fixes a lot for the deck. Being able to selectively mill up any of your XoverDresses and, any of your Trickstars is really big. And then in Bav, if Trick Moon somehow went to 1, this is an option. Bav has so much good quality of life cards to just draw and resource that I don't think you'll need this. But if Veil Lord or Trick Moon went to 1, or if people decide to experiment this and play 4 of this, when this card is ditched, you just easily selectively mill your one of Veil Lord or one of your Trick Moons, which is just really, really easy. It's easy ditch fodder. Sure, in the late game it's dead, but you could also, play Apogee or other cards to search, Trick Moon and Seundi to set up this card and actually use the skill. Sure, you won't get the crit restand effect, but you'll still get big power. And, in Elf Knights, you can search Apogee off the grade 2 ride line and then easily set up this as well. So this card just is really generic. I don't know why it's not restricted to Jheva Vanguard. They could have made it Blaze Maiden, but I guess it would still work with Bav, but technically the new Bav isn't a Blaze Maiden. But anyways, the point is that this card is really, really generic, just from that one skill alone. Then they changed the auto, basically, so you won't activate all the original dress skills. So auto, when it's placed on rearguard circle by XoverDress, all of the cards put as original dress by this effect cannot activate their auto abilities until end of turn. Put all cards from your drop as this unit's original dress. Exactly what we saw in the anime, so none of the draw skills will go off, but supposedly cons will still go off. So, we have Kolmadak, which supposedly will still get power. I think you're still only going to play, 1 or 2 of it. You can, kind of get it out of deck through the Heavenly Blazing package, but I still don't think it's really much of an option to play more of it because you really have no deck space and you need better cards in order to draw and live. So basically that skill is there, so we know that all the autos such as Apogee's draw 1 and Arnias' CC isn't going off multiple times, unfortunately, from shoving everything into soul. Then continues rearguard circle. When this unit would leave the rearguard circle, if it would be put to a zone other than drop, put all that unit's original dress into drop, and this does matter for matchups and also ruins the premium Nuba interaction essentially, because if you would bounce it, all of the original dress go to drop instead of going to hand. So in standard, this is a really big buff because it's a con, meaning that anytime it would go to prison, bot deck, bine, whatever, it's just sending all of its original dress to drop so it's not getting lost. And, there's no way really to lose that effect besides the Ace unit and I guess Sacrifice class, really anything that makes it lose abilities. So, there could be some really funny interactions there, but for the most part, this patches up like a really big, weakness that we saw with the skill. In the last skill, there's also a really big deal of you may. So the last skill is auto rearguard circle for the crit restand and power. So when this unit in the XoverDress state attacks, it gets plus 1k until end of battle for each of its original dress. So like weaker Skull Dragon, you'll get a lot of power really, really fast, especially as the game goes on. And if this unit stood by your card ability this turn, which is going to restand through StravaRina's CP1, restand all of your Talisman and all of your Prayer Dragons. Then you may have this unit get crit +1 until end of battle. If you did, at the end of that turn, retire this unit. So if you choose to restand it and not gain the crit, it will keep all of its original dress, which is really important because in some matchups, such as let's say Prison, which is kind of a pain, sure, with the Kant skill, it's going to go to drop anyways, so you're probably going to use this skill, but technically you could just keep all of your drop in your soul, and your opponent has nothing to prison from drop, and maybe in premium this could come up, but I doubt you're playing this in premium. But you know, against like Erads, for example, you have nothing in drop for them to basically bind. So really interesting that they kind of gave a lot of autonomy in terms of like, it has the Kant where it forces you not to move all the original dresses with it, but at the same time it also has, you know, that kind of flexibility where you don't necessarily have to gain the crit, and you'll keep all the original dress soul, let's say, for the next turn. If it does retire, it's kind of just clearing itself out from the front row, like in the Artist Area lock matchup, and then your XoverDress should have, you know, resist from Apargia. So you're basically, you know, not leaving yourself too vulnerable to lock or, you know, other mechanics that might kind of screw you over. So I think this card is just a really big upgrade. It's got a lot of text, it does a lot of things, and it honestly saves the deck. Do I think this deck is going to be meta, especially looking at the other cards we saw before? Honestly, no, but as a Jheva player, you know, I'm pretty happy with this. I do still think the deck should have gotten a new ride line. Like, if you look at the ride line, it's pretty old at this point, and compared to any modern ride line, it's not good. It still doesn't guarantee you a Talisman, because you still basically have to ditch Ars Vairina, mill out that Talisman, add it back to hand, or just hard find it off the check top 7 from Alpru, because your ride line doesn't guarantee you a Talisman. I don't know why they designed it that way. Still one of my biggest gripes with the deck, especially because, you know, the original Nirvana ride line with the Blaze Maidens did search the OG Vairina, but for some reason Jheva doesn't. But anyways, that is enough kind of ranting about Ars Vairina. A really interesting potential, generic in Dragon Empire. You could definitely meme with this in Alpha Knights. Crit +1 on restand is hilarious. This is technically a consistency piece for Bav if people wanted to experiment with it. You know, being able to guarantee mill your Talisman, any Talisman, because Trick Moon and Baylord, again, our Talisman are really good. In Mahar, this could be very interesting as well. If you want to try like Clad and Prayers build, you can mill out Arcs, you can mill out Esperidia, you know, any of your pieces. Like, sure, you're already playing Forbiddle and other things in Mahar to guarantee that consistency for Esperidia, but it's still kind of an upgrade there. But, you know, getting XoverDress in Mahar is a little bit complicated, especially in terms of deck building now, because the deck kind of has to like go second Amelia or just go first, blow up your opponent, and, you know, it's a really old deck that has barely got any support. But yeah, in terms of deck building, I'll talk about that once I get to the deck list, but there's a lot to break down for this card, so that's why this section is really long. I think there's just a lot of interesting card design here. It does have a lot of text, so it might not seem that way at first. It's just a blurb of text like a lot of other modern DZ cards, but there's a lot of really cool potential here in terms of deck building, and again, being able to selectively mill out cards just for ditching is really big. And of course, when you discard this, you know, for Jheva's effect or ride deck, it's going to be proccing every time. And of course, there's a lot of really easy ways to salvage if you play the Jheva deck to get it from drop back into hand. So I think really big upgrade. Of course, being able to mill XoverDress and get that is really big as well, because before, really, you just had to hard mull, pray you find XoverDress or find it off Alpru. Otherwise, you're not playing the game, because that plus 10k triple drive to van is really big. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for Ars Vairina. I'll talk more about other potential once I get to the list. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward card. Giant beater, gets crit +1, really good. Alright, so the next card to talk about is Trickstar and Seundi, and this guy is the star that we saw you use in the Friday episode. So it's continuous rearguard circle deck and drop, just like we thought. This card is also regarded as Trickstar, then continuous rearguard circle. When you would choose originalDress for XoverDress, you may regard this card as a total of 2 cards, being 1 Trickstar and 1 Prayer Dragon. Then auto when it's attacked, if this card is an originalDress, so basically it's in the soul of an overdress unit or XoverDress unit, you may move this card to Guardian Circle. If you did, this unit gets shield +5 until end of battle, so it's a 10k shield. Then continuous, when this card's outerDress would be put into deck or bind zone, put all at that unit's originalDress into drop. So this is kind of another failsafe on top of Ars Vairina. So, you know, if something would happen, that originalDress drop is still staying. More importantly, though, that's really interesting is that Mahar can play more than 4 Trickstars, because I remember back in the day, some people really liked Trickstar as their starter to guarantee that second Trickstar in Mahar. So now you basically have a better Trickstar. He doesn't have resist, though, which is really funny. I was really sure, because that's like Trickstar's thing, that the new one would get resist, but apparently not. But I mean, this is just a really big upgrade for the deck. It's another 10k shield on your board. Once you get 4 of these, that's free 40k shield, which is really nice. And also, you know, it's when any of your units are attacked, so it'll proc very easily. And then, of course, being able to count for 2 original dress is really big, and this is easy to tutor as well because it's a Prayer Dragon and a Talisman, which is really important because this means you can call this and Trickstar as well, like the original Trickstar if you were playing multiple. Kind of hard to say if you are going to be playing this and the original Trickstar as well, but the point is, because it's a Prayer Dragon Talisman, it can be either of those targets for Jheva's skill, and since it's a Prayer Dragon, Apargia can also Soul Blast 1 Ditch, call it out of deck, tutoring it out. So you have lots of easy ways besides the ride line, because of course the ride line will call you a Trickstar, and this is regarded as a Trickstar, so you'll call this out from deck off your ride line. But I mean, you have lots of other ways to guarantee that second Trickstar, which is one of the biggest problems of the deck, because you basically had to play Shergalio before. In my opinion, I think you'll probably still play at least one Shergalio because you can tutor it off of Apargia. You're usually tutoring Argnius or something else first, but you know, you could still play that. You could still play that Shergalio because you do need 2 Trickstars out on that turn where you lose a lot of your board. Because yes, Buzzsaw will be a Prayer Dragon, but Shergalio makes that easier for 1CB to kind of just fill up your board again. You know, make that one Vairina, and then you kind of fill up your board again and make the other Vairina, because otherwise your board is all clogged up, especially if you had Seundi or anything else on standby. But yeah, this card is a massive upgrade to the deck. That Kant is a really nice failsafe for any of the outer dresses. It's not necessarily resist, because that thing will still, you know, get basically removed. You know, anytime it's basically going into deck or bind again, you know, it's going into drop, so you're not losing your original dress, which is big. So again, that kind of like the extra failsafe, so in case, you know, Ars Vairina does lose abilities through means like the Ace unit or whatnot. This card is just really, really good. It's a big upgrade for the deck, obviously counting as 2, very easy to tutor, 10k shield, definitely the best card besides Ars Vairina, which is really just the stars of the deck. So thankfully, I was just freaking out when I saw the episode because I was like, this is just an amazing effect. So the last card to talk about is Maiden Eesure, and this is a little bit of a conflict with the Alpru because it uses 3 energy, but has auto. When placed on Rearguard Circle, you cost Energy Blast 3, choose a card with Vairina in its card name from your drop, and put it into your hand, so it combos perfectly with Ars Vairina's skill when you ditch, you know, shove it to soul, mill Talisman, then you'll call this out, and this also does not need you to be on a grade 3 greater Vanguard, so you can easily, you know, grab like mirrors or whatever else you would want to call, you know, a Talisman early on turn 2 instead of turn 4 and get it out there, so that is amazing. Then act on Rearguard Circle. If you have a grade 3 greater Vanguard with Nirvana its card name, you cost retire this unit, choose a Prayer Dragon for your drop, and call it to Rearguard Circle. And that's really important because this card is a human, so one of the biggest problems with Alpru is because it doesn't restand, it kind of just stays there on the board. Yes, it's giving the +5 pump, which does matter for numbers, but you know, it's really nice that this card can just sack itself off. Grab yourself another Prayer Dragon from drop, because you have a lot of basically utility between things on standby, because once you call 2 things off Jheva skill, you'll usually have Buzzsaw, or if you have the ideal setup, you'll have Buzzsaw, then Seundi on standby, then this can also swap into something else, but your board might also be clogged because you only have so many Rearguard Circles to work with. So I think this card is in contention with Alpru. I think Alpru is just easier to slam down early, and you know, will just check top 5, and you have a lot of targets now to work with because you have the new Trickstar, which is a Prayer Dragon and a Talisman, and then you also have your main deck Talisman as well, which is the main reason why we really like Alpru. But this is more consistent if you are seeing Ars Vairina. So I think this is still the better card to play, arguably over Alpru, because it has that consistency of getting you a Prayer Dragon. Getting that extra Prayer Dragon does make a difference, and especially on your kill turns, because you're restanding all your Prayer Dragons. You could be restanding an AK booster that is essentially pumping a column twice, because you'll boost that with the Vairina in front of it, and then, you know, Ars Vairina will restand your whole board, so it'll restand as well. So I think this card, I'm not too sure if you want to be playing this or Alpru. I think it'll definitely come down to like playtesting first to see, you know, what feels more comfortable and what feels more consistent, because yes, Alpru is checking top 7, but it doesn't really do anything for whiffing is the thing. But it's usually pretty hard to whiff Alpru and not see any Trickstars or any Talisman off the top 7. But yeah, I think this card is a little bit more interesting, especially as a double rare, and it's obviously printed to have a lot more synergy with Ars Vairina, so it is a really, really good card regardless, especially for a double rare. Okay, so the last card to talk about is Maiden Ardelay, and this card is kind of a throwaway because it's a human and it's not really getting you any Talisman or Trickstars. or Prayer Dragons. But anyways, as continuous rearguard circle Guardian Circle skill, if you have a grade 3 grade or Vanguard with Nirvana its card name, all of your grade 0 talisman get shield +5. So it turns all of your Trickstar and Seundis into 15k shields, which I think is really interesting. I wish we got more really cool cards like this, and I think this is really cool because it adds onto that guarding mechanic of the original dress skill of Trickstar and Seundi. So really cool card. I don't think you have space for this because your space is already so tight in the deck once I start talking about deck lists, but still a really cool card design wise nonetheless. So here's my first draft of the list that I made before we actually got the full reveals of everything. And so here we have Trickmoon as the brand new Trickstar and Seundi, and Expecta is here as the brand new Ars Vairina. So this list is a pretty straightforward list, I would say. I think you do want 9 Vairinas, but I know some people play less. It's just you have less targets and it's really hard to find. But now that we know that Ars Vairina mills, thankfully things are a lot more consistent because you can mill it out and then grab it back from drop, because Apargia can tutor out Agnias, and you also have Cindy as well. I think Cindy is really weird because yes, she is really good for the deck, but you know, it's a one less target in your deck essentially for the rad line for Prayer Dragons. And, you know, you really need to see Prayer Dragons and Talisman early. So Cindy, unless you really hit, isn't really good in rotation. But I think you definitely still want at least 1, probably 2. I'm just not too sure what to take out for deck space here. Again, you do have the option to play, you know, just the 4 Trickmoon and Seundi, now that we know it's really easy to tutor out. But, you know, some people might vouch to maybe play like their 1 shiny DSR Trickstar or something else. So we might see lists that play 4 Seundi and Trickstar, and then maybe 1 or 2 normal Trickstars, which was kind of the idea with this list. Because once you can't find that second Trickstar for 2 XoverDress units, things get really complicated and your numbers are really bad, which is why some people were running the grade 3 Prayer Dragon that on attack gets +10, but I don't really like that because it's kind of just like a vanilla besides that. Like, it is a really nice number, but like 23k just isn't cutting it. Like, you have to really just be plussing or rushing down your opponents in standard really to keep up. You don't really need Fire Reckless in here. Honestly, Fire Reckless is just kind of a one-up slot you can throw in, but it's very cuttable. So technically, if you do cut the original Trickstars as well as Fire Reckless, you have 3 more slots to work with. But this is kind of the idea of the list. Buzzsaw here is at 1. Alpru is really nice because check top 7, add any talisman is really good. And Apargia has to be at 4 because we know which tutors like your Trickmoon and Sundis. Trickmoon and Sundis, not Trickstar and Sundis. And, you know, it's just really good. Resist draw 1 is what you need in the early game. And I think you still want at least 1 to 2 mirrors because that card is basically your best draw power in the deck. Alright, so now for the more solid Heavenly Blazing version of the list. As you can see here, there's no Fire Reckless, and the Trickstar here is Trickstar and Seundi, and then Expecta here is again the brand new Ars Vairina. This list is a lot more straightforward. There's still only that 1 mirrors because your deck space is really tight. You can swap Alpru here for the brand new Blaze Maiden that we just talked about, the double rare that grabs from drop, because I think that will have a lot more drop salvage, and then you'll still have 5 cards that use energy, but it's not too terrible because I don't think your energy is going to be conflicting that much with only 5. I think you can get away with 5 to 6 cards and it shouldn't feel too terrible even during your going first turn because basically all your energy will go to those cards. You do have, you know, Nandik, Coldmac, and, you know, those are going to be tutored out by Drahas because Drahas is going to CB1, sack something off, call it out. And if he does sack something in the XoverDress state, you will draw 1 in case, you know, you had something just stuck on your board, such as mirrors or whatnot, and that you want to get rid of, because you do ideally want to set up Vairina and Ars Vairina on that turn 3 to really just get that push power out of those 3 drives and get value out of those restands. So I do think this version of the list is closer to what people will actually run now that we know that Ars Vairina can easily tutor, and of course, not Drahas, Apargia can also tutor out a Trickstar as well, Trickstar and Seundi. So, you know, I think this list looks a lot more cohesive compared to what I had before, and I think this is what most people will go off on. You can cut something here for Fire Regulus or Regulus piece if you really want, but this is pretty much what the list will probably look like. You can also cut out Strigalio if you just see the Trickstars, because I don't think you really need it. It's just in some matchups where you do have both of your, you know, original dresses essentially cleared off your board, it's really hard to get 2 Trickstars back and also have enough Prayer Dragons, unless your hand was all Prayer Dragons, but then that means you were probably dying last turn because you had like no shield in your hand, or, you know, you just drew every PG and you lived anyways. So also, we have the Celebration PGs in the middle, by the way. Those are just regular overdress PGs. I didn't mention that for the other list. But yeah, I think this list looks really good. Agnias could also be at 2 instead of 1. It's just he's at 1 because of deck space, and Apargia can tutor him out. So that's really the reasoning for a lot of stuff. Same for Buzzsaw. Buzzsaw is really good when you see it, and like it's easy pitch fodder on top of Ars Vairina because you'll pitch him, then turn 3, once you res a Trickstar and something else, he'll come out. I do think you could also throw in Cindy and something else here and like cut and make space, but I think Seundi is really good because she does get you that extra soul, especially if you're playing like Ars Vairina or something else over Mirrors. But I still think Mirrors is one of the best cards in the deck. Again, I haven't play tested yet with these brand new cards, but I do think Mirrors is still one of the best cards in your deck. It's also your only CC as well, which is a big problem in your kill turns, because if you don't have the second CB for Strawberry's restand the board, you are not really doing anything that turn. So for Nadika here, his Battledore does definitely come up, especially on the crit restand effect, because in the late games, once your Ars Vairina is really big with 2 crit, it will get 3 cards out of their hand, especially if they're at 4. This is swinging for lethal damage. But personally, I don't like him too much until like your first grade 3 turn, because when your numbers are really big in the late game, he's not making too much of a difference except for that lethal swing. So he's really just here because of the Heavenly Blazing package, same for Koldak. And we know that Koldak will likely work, but I would still wait for a judge ruling on that and give that extra, essentially plus 9k power, which does kind of matter for numbers, especially when you're restanding that unit twice. And again, Strigoli is kind of just thrown in here, but he's obviously pretty cuttable as well out of the deck, because we know it's pretty easy to get, your Trickstar and Seundis back. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. That pretty much does it for me. Those are my thoughts on all of the cards. Really, we only had 4 cards to talk about, but I think there's a lot of generic potential that I spent a lot of time talking about for Ars Vairina that kind of comes out just from that one skill alone of tutoring out a Talisman and having that, on restand crit +1 effect be generic. I don't have a Mahar list right now, but I could cook one up later. But Mahar is pretty in a desperate situation. But yeah, I think this is a really big upgrade for Jheva. Those are my overall thoughts. I think it's a big consistency booster, which is the biggest thing for this deck. This deck had like 0 consistency because you were really relying on just hard mulligan finding a Vairina or just drawing it. Like if you did not find a Vairina or Alpril that found you a Vairina, you were not doing anything. The Ride line is still technically value because the new Trickstar you're tutoring is 2 units, and that will help a lot. But it doesn't have resist, so it could get binded or killed early. If it gets sent to drop by the ace unit or something, you don't care because you'll res it off anyways off Jheva. But if it does get binded or through other means, it's really annoying, so you do have to watch for that. But between Ars basically sending everything to drop, you being able to give Strawberryna resist, I don't think it's too big of an issue. Like, you won't really have too hard of a matchup in bind matchups unless your Prayer Dragons get binded and you don't have enough, which I think is one of the most annoying things about this deck, where you really don't have the Prayer Dragons in rotation, or you're not playing enough and they all go poof, which is why I usually don't like Alpru or Blaze Maiden that are humans basically at too many copies. But yeah, that's just my personal preference with this deck. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think of these lists, what you think of these brand new cards. I honestly don't think this is going to make Jheva meta, but I think it's a really big upgrade for the deck. I think it probably puts it in tier 2-ish maybe at best. It's definitely playable. Like, I don't think you should be underestimating this deck. You definitely have to know what it does, because it will be popular once it gets this new support in set 11. But I don't think it's really going to be anywhere near like Alpha Knights and Bav, honestly. But yeah, still a really good deck. I think you do want mirrors or something to kind of mitigate your hand early game, because by turn 3, your hand is usually looking really weak unless you've just like no guarded a bunch of times. And that means you're in really high damage and you could explode next turn. So that pretty much wraps everything up for Jheva. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you another time in another video, hopefully.